that donation match, we have another form where you can submit that. All the donations that are made as part of the fundraiser, I'm matching. So I would love for you to contribute there and I will match it. And then you will also, if you are interested, you can check a box saying that you'd like to be entered for a chance to win prizes. We'll be doing a drawing for prizes from people who contribute over a certain threshold. Ordinals, do we know what that threshold is for the donations for the stickers? Ordinals? Hello?
Working on technology.
Okay.
So there will be a threshold. If you exceed that threshold, you'll automatically get a uniquely printed Devil Mask Society sticker that is being printed just for this event.
Right.
I will tell you one of the door prizes is my favorite Japanese bondage photo book by my favorite Japanese bondage artist. Ordinal's got the Akechi book. For me, one for me to celebrate our anniversary a month early.
Okay.
Mine is signed by the photographer.
Okay.
And got an extra one because they didn't know which one they would get, and I was gonna give that one away as one of the door prizes.
I was not made aware of this, so that's awesome.
It's an amazing book.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, there's also going to be a whip from one of our Discord folks, and also I believe it's 10-year anniversary signed edition special print of 50 Shades of Grey for one lucky winner, along with a So yeah, we're looking forward to folks joining us. It's, like I said, on the 4th of July, so coming up pretty quick here. So I want to make sure people were aware. Second piece of business is that I noticed there was an error in our syllabus. The lesson plans and order of the lessons on the website are correct, but the order on the syllabus was just slightly mismatched. So what that means is that in August, we will be doing uplines and lockoffs for like heading into suspension. Then basically these two things have swapped, right? So lockoffs are going to be in August, where we originally said we were going to be doing a history lesson. The history lesson is pushing back into October to give you all more time to practice with your lockoffs and things before we get to suspension. So that's the main change. I just want to make sure people are aware. I know some of you had been looking at the syllabus very closely, and just a note that it has shifted slightly.
Question from the back.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting us know. Isn't there a class coming up that we don't need our models for? And if so, which is it?
That history lesson.
The
Yeah.
question was, is there a class that we don't need models for
Yeah.
everyone at home? The answer was the history lesson.
Right. But that said, everyone can get something out of the history lesson. Should they choose to join, they're welcome to do that. They could also watch the live stream, right? If they don't want to tromp down here to downtown LA.
Also,
But we do the history lesson as a brunch. So y'all are welcome to bring food and snacks and whatever. It will be in our unit upstairs. So we won't be here, we'll be upstairs on a couch and hanging out. So there's that. But again, we'll remind you of that as we get closer to October, because that's a while from now. Those are the announcements I had. Do you have any?
the other announcement that I want to make sure that everybody is aware of is that applications have opened for NARIX, which is the North American Rope Innovation Exchange. It's going to be held at Threshold in Los Angeles this year. Which is pretty wild. If you haven't been or aren't aware of NARIX, it is meant to be a gathering of rope folks from all over North America to share differences in perspective, approach, and tying to further the baseline level of what rope is broadly across the United States, or North America, excuse me.
So both, I know that they have historically encouraged people who are participating, like sort of as educators and community leaders from around North America to apply. My understanding is that that is even slightly more broad these days. Like, sort of, if you are enthusiastic about rope, they are enthusiastic about having you as an applicant. Yeah.
They're limiting it to 80, and you have to have suspension Yes.
There you go. Okay.
I thought it was 150. No, not for-
Because the
not the
space-
threshold.
Yeah, so the comment was that they are,
50 apps.
yeah, so the comment was that they are limiting the capacity to 80 participants for this iteration here in Los Angeles, and that they are requiring folks to have had suspension experience. That is because of the size and capacity of the venue, which is, again, Threshold here in Los Angeles, which is fairly small. My understanding is they are going to be installing hardpoints, because currently Threshold only has 4, which is not enough.
So broadly as a community, we get to enjoy more hard points. Hashtag thanks, Narix.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a thing, yeah,
But
question?
you can apply as a bottom or a switch or a self-suspender, there's other requirements for that, but if you.
Right.
So the comment was that you can apply as a bottom, you can apply as a switch, you can apply as self-suspender. You don't need to have suspension experience from the tying direction to it.
Right, but my guess is that still they would expect if you're applying as a bottom, that you would also have had suspension experience, because otherwise, who are the people who are tying going to tie if the bottoms don't have suspension experience? So there's that, but essentially the point is, for each type of applicant, the requirements are slightly different, right? So take a look at the application if that's a thing you're interested in. If you have questions about what that entails, Andrew and I have attended in the past. We organized the previous one here in Los Angeles. It is slightly different now than when we were on that organizing group, but also some folks in your cohort have attended recently and may have feedback as well. So just a note there. I think with that, we can move into our next mini
Yeah.
lesson.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So there were a couple of things that we wanted to have a conversation about. I want to make sure that I've gotten all these in my head.
Mhm.
So first and foremost, I know that I've seen a lot of y'all out in the wild now tying in public spaces or interacting with things. And we wanted to have a conversation about making sure that you are aware of your space and you are aware of the people that are in your space, and in some ways how to, for lack of a better term, guard your space while you are out tying in places.
Mhm.
Um,
So, I mean, just for y'all, you may have noticed, and we do this fairly, probably once per session that we gather, is we tell you all, hey, if you're past this line, you're going to be on camera. That is us setting context of, this is our space, and that is your space. And please respect this boundary. Today, we have these nice yellow markings on the floor to make it very clear, thanks to ordinals. But when you are out in the wild, tying around other people, you may need to find ways to demarcate your space. If you are, for instance, using mats of some kind, that's a very natural delineation point. Like, people can probably intuit that, like, oh, I shouldn't enter this space. Sometimes that's not an option. So, for instance, Andrew and I may use some extra rope to mark sort of, this is the corners of our space, right? It becomes a little more clear that, oh, that's a space for us. You might also consider actually unfurling them, right? And laying them out to make it even more explicit, like, this is my space, right? This is my boundary, please don't enter here.
Additionally,
People still may not get it, but at least you've tried, right?
part of the reason that I carry this for Shiki to carry my rope in is that I can lay it out.
Mhm. And it happens to be roughly a good size for me to be on, right? It may not be the right size for everyone, but this, I think this is 3 feet square, is roughly the right size for me.
It's just big enough for the two of us.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't give me a whole lot of room to operate, but it gives me enough room in a tight space to do that.
Yeah.
Right?
And again, it's very clear visual indication to other people, this is our space, please don't enter. Right?
If you are in a space with a dungeon monitor or some sort of play monitor, it's important to let them know that you'll be tying. It's important to know how much space you'll need to take. It's important to make sure that they'll be monitoring to ensure that no one else enters your space.
Or can help guard that space for you, right? Like, you can recruit them as your advocate for this space, for maintaining that space. They may not always be available. That may not always be an option at whatever space you're in. It may not be monitored in that way. Or it just might be close quarters, right? Andrew and I have had the privilege to travel to Japan. A lot of the places where people do rope there are tiny bars. They are very close quarters.
Probably half the size of this room.
Right, tiny. If you remember back to some of the exercises we had you do early in the curriculum, we practiced pulling upward, right? And controlling the ends of your rope so that you don't hit the people around you. That skill comes in very handy when you're in close quarters and trying not to hit the person you are tying or the people around you. That said, sometimes you want to use those ends of the rope to discourage people from being too close, right? Surprise, if you get hit with the ends of the rope, you might move, right? But being able to, with intention, use those ends of the rope as you choose is the skill that we hope you have developed over these past several months, so that you can either not hit people or intentionally hit people lightly, right? Just get their attention like, hey, you are in my space.
Lightly is relevant.
Right.
Um,
But, right, like, discouraging them from intruding on the space that you have set.
The point that Melissa's speaking to is that regardless of what you do to delineate your space or who you talk to help you to guard that space, there are going to be instances where people don't understand the etiquette of what you're doing, and they're still going to enter your space and do things.
Especially with rope seams, people tend to not quite grasp sort of the need for a carved out space, or that a space has even been carved out for that activity, unless you are at a rope or bondage specific event.
And even then they won't.
Sometimes, yeah.
There are a couple of things that I would offer you as options that I use when those instances happen. Oftentimes people don't understand the complexity of what you're doing, the headspace of what you're doing, or the danger that's involved in the thing that you're doing. So things that I would encourage you to do, first and foremost, is the single hand. As soon as someone starts talking to you, can you show me how to, This is not the place for that, right?
Or not right now.
Yeah.
Right? Like, not right now.
or-
And just a curt, like, direct, and as few words as possible can be very effective. Sometimes it doesn't even take words. It can be a look and like a firm hand, and that's enough to get that person to
The
stop.
withering look is hard to master with masks on. I find it helps with the tight-lipped grimace when I look at somebody,
Yeah.
but still being able to look at somebody like can be helpful.
Yeah,
Remember to exaggerate that.
yeah.
Um,
It is definitely harder from the person who is being tied, especially if their hands are behind their back, to participate in that sort of space holding. But sometimes the person will be addressing the person, the person intruding into your scene may be addressing the person in the rope. So it is important for that person to take the initiative to stop that in its tracks. Again, not right now. Happy to answer questions when we're done, type of thing, right? Like,
And the one
we
thing
can talk later.
The one thing I would encourage people to keep in mind is like it's really easy to become like hey, fuck off, I'm doing this thing. When in all probability the person who is stepping into your scene and saying something, the only reason they're doing that is because they're ignorant. They don't understand what the etiquette is.
They're enthusiastic and really excited to talk to someone and ask questions about what you're doing because they want to try it. So ideally, matching that enthusiasm but diverting them to a later time when it is more appropriate would be ideal.
And then talking to them not only about their questions, but like what etiquette is and what is appropriate. Thing that came up as recently as this Friday, Nora and I were at a party, Nora and I were tying, and someone's reaction from watching us was as though we were performing, not as though we were singing. And they were like, yes, great job, love it. And we're just like, cool, that's not the scene, friend. Like, that's not the scene. And I'm not going to do that in the middle of the scene because that's not what the scene is about. But afterwards, walking up to the person and being like, hey, like, that's not the vibe that everybody's into all of the time. And while we appreciate you appreciate the thing that we're doing, we're not here for your commentary. So appreciate in silence would be helpful. Or ask people if it feels good to have those compliments, or shave up the compliments until afterwards. While it can be construed that somebody entering the space that you're tying in is rude on their part, it is likely rudeness out of ignorance. You being a dick back to them is you just being a dick. Right?
You
So-
have more context on this activity than they do, right? And like, you can help set that, sort of the vibe of the interaction. You can control how you react, you can't control what they do.
Yeah.
But you can certainly offer suggestions for how you would like to be interacted with, and for going forward that they might consider approaching people in a different way.
What
the
was
future.
what was the next bit we're gonna talk about?
We're gonna talk about an exercise for our lovely students to try.
Oh yeah, which one?
Yeah, we're gonna get a rope.
Yeah.
You're going
I
to
hate this one.
You're going to set a space using that
I
singular
hate
rope.
this one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make this really complicated for me.
Using a single rope, Andrew's going to carve out a space for us to tie. This one's hard.
There we go.
He made it extra hard. Back it up a little bit.
Oh.
So we're on camera. There we go.
I gotta make it extra hard.
Yeah. Now,
Okay.
I'm going to stand in this space that Andrew has created. Andrew is also going to stand in this space that Andrew has created. He's going to tie a 2-rope gote on me without setting a foot outside of this space. Yeah.
Think
And
where you're
then
thinking.
you all get to try.
This does not allow you to get.
So thing number one to keep in mind, and this is gonna help you keep these things in mind when you're in tiny spaces. Thing number one, I can't leave this space.
So maybe put
I better
everything-
be able to reach everything I need in
Very
order to
close.
tie in this space.
What are those things, you might ask? Well, rope, also a cutting tool, right? The
I
thing
don't
you-
have belt loops. Oh, I do have belt loops on
Yeah,
this.
the thing you don't want to be doing, just a reminder, with your cutting
Oh, that's not
tool,
actually a belt loop.
is tuck it into your
Got it.
waistband. But the thing you don't want to be doing in an emergency is digging through your bag in a dark club while you're flustered trying to find your black cutting tool. So please have everything at hand. Okay, we're
Oh,
timed
hold
now.
on. We are timed now.
Okay.
I'm gonna see how well,
We haven't done this exercise in years,
since the last time we did it for the summer.
right? Which was like 3 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
2 years.
Pre-pandemic.
Previously on the pandemic.
I don't recall who we got this exercise from. It might have been Stefano?
Maybe. Remember
Anyway,
that person?
too big, crazily. Anyway, we did not come up with this exercise, but you can hate us for it anyway. That's fine with me. It is challenging. As I mentioned, some of those exercises we gave you early on of like pulling your rope at different angles and using your full wingspan are gonna come extra handy for this particular exercise. One thing I will note is that just because we started with both of us facing you all, that doesn't mean I have to stay facing that way, right? You
I could turn Melissa around if I wanted
You
to.
can both manipulate your body and your rope, but also the body of the person you are tying. So that is another way that you can
That was terrible.
use your space without exceeding the space that you have set for yourself.
I'm also working to keep my rope ends inside the rope bit. It's not perfect, but
Right. Will you call attention to when you do that?
yeah. So you can see I'm uncoiling directly where my feet are. I'm not throwing things out. It would be way easier to do this if I could throw this length of rope out because I've been tying with it a bunch, so it's not in
It's not
my
perfect.
preferred shape.
It's not perfectly, like even at the bite.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's trying to find his bite and do all those things.
But like I'm keeping,
Still being in the circle.
I am now pulling my arm towards my body to clear the rope and then pulling my arm towards my body to stay in
in the space.
the space. When I pull my rope out, I'm pulling down towards my feet, because I always know the distance of where my feet are, excuse me.
He's not gonna hit anybody but himself if he
Yeah.
goes toward his feet. Maybe a little bit, but not too bad.
Right. And then creative usage of turning Melissa around, reaching in the back, pulling through for Kanuki, making sure my lines are as straight as possible. Again, pulling down, turning Melissa.
Right, so times where typically you would move around the person you're tying. In this instance, if you're very close quartered, you might consider just rotating them.
Mm-hmm.
Because him trying to get around me with like, 6 inches of clearance in front of me and that's it, probably not gonna happen. Probably gonna lose balance, you would be like bumping into people.
And there have only been a handful of times where we needed to tie like this, but there have been times where we needed to tie like this.
So I would say actually when we were in Japan, it wasn't that bad because we went on days where like there just weren't that many people at the bar. But if you decide that you want to attend something like I don't know, bondage ball, where people really won't understand what you're doing and there's not much space because it's really crowded, they sell out a lot of tickets for stuff like that. You might find yourself like in a tiny corner and just like, oh, I want to put a quick harness on this person. And I don't have much space, you may find that you need to do something like this.
Or if you go to a party that's more of a sex party than a bondage party,
Yeah,
and people are staring at you like you're gonna have sex, and you just wanna make them uncomfortable with the fact that they can't see what you're doing,
yeah.
you might both face the wall away from where anyone can see,
This is
And
a
then
thing,
tie.
this is exactly a thing that we've done.
just to make them sad, because they can't see what you're doing. Because I'm not here for your voyeurism, bro.
Sometimes we are, but not always. Yeah. Will you clear the wrap on my lower left arm?
Lower left.
Upward, please. Yeah, there we go. That's good. So yeah, this is an exercise that y'all are gonna get to do in just a minute.
Mhm.
What do you think?
Almost done.
Almost there.
Still getting used to new rope, so. There we go. Done. Yeah, all in enough room for our 2 feet to fit. Challenge! You do it.
How long?
Let's say 15 minutes.
So you're gonna take Hey y'all, welcome back. So you may have noticed while you were doing that exercise that not only was it challenging to move your rope and keep it within your space and move yourself within that space, but it was also challenging to move the other person. As someone smaller than the people I tend to tie, I wanted to talk a little bit about how I maneuver this person. As you may notice, it doesn't work very well for me to try to wrap around Andrew's body, right? He is much larger than my arms have diameter for. This makes holding tension and doing all that stuff really awkward. So rather than me standing and him standing, I like to have him kneeling. And me either standing, or if he kneels all the way down, I can kneel with one leg up. And from this position, I have a lot more control over how I'm going to move him. I can also, will you put your arms down? Thank you. Ask nicely and he does stop, which is great. But I can also, when I am doing a wrap, rather than trying to be awkward and come around and, T-Rex arms doesn't work very well. Instead, I can come up and diagonally over, grab the rope, maintain the tension, right? Do my wraps. And in that way, it becomes a lot more manageable to do all the things I need to do, manipulate the body, keep my tension. But with this one leg up, I have the ability to move him. So if I needed to do kaneki, I can kind of tip him over. I don't recommend top kaneki, but this is demonstration purposes only.
My nerves.
Yeah. Report, right? But I can
Someone pull up FetLife.
I can get to this side of his body a lot more easily, and my base, because I have this leg up and my other leg behind me bent and on the ground, I have a lot more stability where I can move him, I can manipulate him, we can have a connection, all without
One whole connection.
one singular connection.
We're only allowed to have one connection at a
Yeah,
time.
but I can do all of that without needing him to get up, me needing to get up. What I don't ever want to see any of you doing, what I would prefer you not to do, is this and this. This is very hard on your back, so I don't recommend it, but I do see people doing that a lot, where they will be standing and then their person's sitting, and they're like, well, I gotta get down here, and then I'm gonna do the kaneki, and then I'm gonna stand back up and I'm gonna go down. And then I'm gonna come down here maybe and do some fiddling, and then stand back up and come around, right? One, it's just very efficient. Two, I'm in no way in contact with this person. Maybe that's what you're into, and you like having a lot of distance, but I know when I'm doing rope, I like to be very close. I like to be able to see him, I like to be able to touch him, and I can do that a lot more easily from here. Also, if I have one leg up, I can bring it down and kind of maneuver around him. Again, this is not something that everyone can do.
If you can't get good at the duck walk,
It's kind of hard on the knees, but if
this
you are able to
this
kind
little
of,
move right here is really helpful.
right. If you are able to do this, it is something that can help you get around, right? Because I know one thing that, especially as we're doing the third rope pattern, that we encourage you to do is come to the front. But I can do that fairly easily if I'm up on my knees like this, right? I can swivel, I can pivot, I can get up and change sides, right? So now my left leg is up, my right knee is down, but I can switch out pretty easily. I can also use my elbows, kind of manipulate him, rotate him, push him around, which he likes. So in these ways, think about how you're moving your body, how you're moving your body in relation to the person you are tying, especially when they're taller than you, right? Get into a position, I'm slightly higher than him here, not super high. If I sit on my butt, we're back to the same problem. right? That doesn't work. I
Oh.
also can't manipulate him as easily.
If I sit on my butt and Melissa just kneels,
Right.
even
If I
without
kneel
that, like,
here, that's okay. If I kneel here, I'm still above him a little bit. So I can still reach over, I can still move him around. I still have a stable base for being able to feel as though I'm in control, which is the point for me as I'm doing this, and know that I can manipulate him in a way that I feel safe and comfortable doing, right? So these are things to consider. May not work for everyone, but options, and especially being able to like move around as best as your mobility will accommodate.
can I make a couple notes?
Absolutely.
Awesome. I'm free.
Hey.
I am also very interested in these things, if you can kneel there for me, as a function of the journey that I take somebody on when I'm in a scene with them, and that communication, and changing of their level in the interaction with them. So I will oftentimes start here, even when I'm tying with a person, and then after I've tied something, adjust them to here, right? And I don't, for me, I tend to be much bigger than the people that I interact with. And so for me, unlike what you just saw with Melissa, where when I am bottoming, I like to be thrown around a lot, I often don't want to exert my force as a way to subvert their expectations. So I may do something as gentle as just like putting my hand and shifting their body, right? Or something as subtle as like rotating them in a circle to down, right? And we'll tie and we'll do what we're doing. And I quite often end up at the end of a scene with someone in some sort of position on the floor, right? And for me in my head, this is just how I play and what my scene is. I like my scenes to be circles. I like them to come back to where I started. So quite frequently at the end of the scene when someone is here, I will tuck their knees, bring their feet back, grab the back of their neck or their shoulder, move in a circle to rotate them back up to kneel. So I take them back to the place that they started from, right?
So this is, that rotational movement that we just went through is distinctly different and a very different experience for the person who is like in it than this, right?
Like, I am not muscling Melissa up. I am using her body and momentum to get her back into the same position again.
Yeah.
It takes some practice to get used to do it sort of gracefully.
It can be done by a person smaller manipulating a person bigger. It takes a lot more practice to become fluid in that movement.
Yeah. But these are little, like, there are sort of the big ways that Melissa demonstrated, and then there are really small ways that are just like one finger or multiple
Yeah.
finger touches.
So as I was doing, I was exaggerating for visual demonstration purposes, but when I'm here, I can like simply push on like the heel of my palm into the his shoulder, like nudge, like encourage him over, right? And it would be even, but I still have my leg there to like guide as he's tipping.
Because I'm big, and if Melissa just,
If I move this way-
Melissa just,
If I went to my left and his left instead, right? So having like a guidepost there to guide and like ease him into that pose makes it a little more fluid. So just again, things to think about. Yes, question?
I'm curious, so when you're kind of getting circled around,
Yeah.
followed back up,
Uh-huh.
like what percentage would you say is you actually bottoming yourself back
Oh,
into that position?
So the question is, how actively am I engaging in the rotation to come back up to seated? Very little.
Really?
Yeah.
I actually
Yeah.
feel like it's harder when the bottom is helping.
It can be because
Stop trying to help.
So the comment was, it sometimes feels harder when the person is actively trying to participate from the bottoming side. And I would somewhat agree. So one, you don't want to be dead weight, ever, generally, in bottoming, right? We would not encourage just sloppy weight. It's much harder to manipulate. That said, you also don't want to generally over-anticipate where you're going, because that can also be detrimental to what the person is trying to achieve. So, yeah, it takes some.
if you're having to put a lot of effort into getting up,
Yeah.
work with the person who you're doing that with to help get that momentum movement cleaner. They're likely not moving in the way that best fits the way your body moves. And so, like anything else, that's a thing that takes practice, right? And it doesn't it works completely different when I do this with Melissa than when I do this with Nora, because their bodies are just like where their center of gravity is different, right? And the first 2 or 3 times I tried to do it with Nora, doing it the way I did it with Melissa, I was like, oh, I need to relearn how to, it's gonna be different with every person that you work with on it. So take some time to sort of figure that out,
Yeah.
right?
And for an option, and especially once we get into where you've learned to do uplines, that you might consider if you're manipulating someone who weighs more than you do, or just is physically larger than you from different proportions, is attaching an upline to the harness and helping use that pulley system as the guide to get them up.
So
right?
one hand you move, the other hand you pull the rope up, and as you pull the rope up, it resets the
It
body.
helps guide them up into their
Yeah.
position.
Yeah,
Yeah.
quick comment as well, I'm actually gonna come up and, Andrew, can I touch you down?
Yeah. I get touched today.
Yeah.
Once a month.
Yikes. In terms of thinking about, how you might manipulate someone, think about where the center of gravity is. So for folks with larger hips, bigger thighs, it's gonna be a little bit lower. For folks who carry more of their weight in their torso or upper body, it's gonna be a little bit higher. And so the further that you move from that center of gravity, the more that you're gonna have to move that body part to take them off center of gravity. So just relax, relax. So shoulders versus hips. And both of those are fun, but they're different. Sort of similarly, the further you are from that center of gravity, thinking about this in terms of simple machines, your lever is longer, so apply less force to begin with because you've got that force multiplier. So I have to apply a little bit more force to shift Andrew at center of mass.
At the fulcrum rather than the edge.
Exactly, versus much less on the shoulders here. Does that feel accurate for you?
Yeah, and I would also say it's interesting because when Ordinals moves my hips, I feel like this is a much less drastic movement than moving my shoulders. I feel like I'm full.
Which is why having my leg there to guide is helpful, because then it's less of a oh God, I'm falling, and more of oh, I'm being moved into.
I am not a carrying shredder.
Yeah.
Right.
And both Ordinals and Melissa are using all of us just use an open palm or a pretty gentle guide down. It is also really helpful to just take one finger and jam it in someone's side. That will motivate them to move in the direction that you need with very little force.
Yeah.
Because you've done something that's unpleasant and their body wants to move away from it.
Also things like ears,
Yeah,
especially for someone like Andrew who is very sensitive about his ears.
Melissa's gonna rip my ears off.
Encouraged to, right? Or if you are playing in a space where you don't need to be wearing masks, there's a very handy thing where you can hook your thumb into their cheek and start to pull.
Yeah.
With permission, with negotiation, but these are things you might consider, right? That is a very intimate and negotiation needed form of play, but the person's gonna go where you guide them.
If you are someone who enjoys playing with fingers and toes, which is again a pretty intimate, intrusive thing, happy to talk through some strategies about that is a thing I really love. So office hours tomorrow, we're fine to be in another space and we can talk about it.
Cool.
We
All
should move on.
of those things out of the way. We'll come to the bulk of class, which will be the last 35, 40 minutes of class.
You
And
get a
that is
variation on a
on
pattern.
hands-out harnesses. You'll notice there was not a video of what the hands-out harness was this month. The reason there was not a video is you now, after having completed your third rope test, have all of the harness components that we are going to teach you. You've learned all of the bits and bobs. And so, for this class, we would like you to recontextualize those things into a hands-out harness that fits for the person that you are tying. Now, this could be something super simple, not to give you a cheat, and if I see you all doing this later, I'm gonna be like, come on, you're uncreative, work on this, come on. It could be something as easy as I tie a waist rope
You anchor it at the waist instead of at the wrist. Ta-da, you're done, right?
to anchor this, and then I just tie a 3-rope gote with the hands out.
We literally went to a class years ago at Shibari Con that was listed as TK, it was TK sans poignet, meaning without wrists. This is all they did. We
This
were
was a
like,
class.
That's a whole class, okay,
You're an instructor? That's the class?
okay.
I saw the person who was being tied for the class like walk by the line to get into the class.
It was like, I understand, I'm going
Wearing
elsewhere.
like fully tied in this thing. I saw them walk by and I was like, cool, let's go to something else. I totally have that.
I understand the 2 hours that I would be spending here.
Some things that I want to make sure that you think about is making sure you're still using proper tension, making sure you're still using frictions in a way that are going to help sustain and anchor your tie. Some ideas that I think you might forget that I want to remind you of in case you want to utilize them are things like you can do, if you remember when we did bamboo, we did running cuffs. So keeping in mind that wraps don't always have to go around the body, they can occasionally use running cuffs to secure portions of the body. Think about those as things that you can use, not just on the arms. Think about ways that you can anchor to the body. So you've got the waist, you've got underneath the chest, you've got above the chest. I don't endorse it, you got the neck. You have the legs, you have the entirety of this person's body to sort of work out where you start from.
Right. Some things to keep in mind though, as you are not creating a hands behind structure, that hand behind structure, not only does it, can it add to the person's feeling of bondage, right? That special Kimbaku feeling, but also it creates a frame for your pattern. And as we're talking about maintaining a consistent tension, if the person's arms are able to move, right? So say Andrew has terrible posture, or rather a rounded posture.
More so.
To not be judgmental. And then as I'm tying, he decides, oh, I need to actually be more upright. Suddenly the entire tension that I've created for those wraps is going to change dramatically. And everything either might get way too tight, it might fall apart, right? So being intentional with where you position the arms and helping them to stay in a singular pose may be vital as you are doing these new constructions.
Also, your answer might be not to have the arms in at all.
Right.
It might be to construct something entirely
Simply-
around the chest and leave the arms completely free.
Simply a chest harness rather than an arms in chest harness. So these are options for you to consider.
Let's take 15 minutes to experiment. We'll come back and do a round of feedback, and then we'll work through the end of class. Questions?
I have
Or no, I think it's, anyway.
Does anyone have any feedback on their first iteration of sort of this structure, other than I hate it and I hate the choices that I made?
I hate it and I hate the choices that I made.
That's one vote for I hate it and I hate the choices that I made.
I learned some lessons. So I started, because, my bottom has really flexible, likes being very fat, and likes staccato, so I started on the very top rack, like just with her behind.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it tight enough, so it loosened as I continued the structure, so that part was like really loose. So
Okay.
I about like starting a lot tighter with that wrap, because then it's gonna, because I worked my way down.
Right.
Rather than up to the bigger part.
So the comment was about, adding more tension to start because knowing that it will get looser as tension is added lower down in the harness.
It's kind of like the Maya Denova.
It's
Yep.
exactly like the
Back
Maya
to
Tenno.
back.
Correct.
Wild.
Yeah.
You're still tying that cone,
Yeah.
so you wanna make sure you have nice firm tension to start.
Other bits of feedback that people have.
Oh,
Oh,
I was gonna say, I feel like I struggle to like get the, I feel like with the wrists and the upper arm of the TK, I feel like it really contains the body in a way that's really easy to build from.
right.
And I
Which was
felt a little lost starting
Anywhere?
anywhere and then just going somewhere
Yeah.
because I'm like, I don't have that like initial box structure that is so compact and easy to work with.
another reason why that tie happens to be as ubiquitous as it is.
Yeah.
I've never felt so unprepared.
Oh.
I was like, oh my god, what the fuck am I doing?
So-
Keep her jacket on. Oh, such a masochist. Okay, but yeah.
I will tell you that for people who were like, oh my god, I had no idea what I was doing, and the opposite for people who were like, sweet, sweet freedom, I can do whatever I want. There will be classes going forward that will appease those who prefer to have structure and direction. And there are classes going forward that will appease those that are like sweet, sweet freedom, sweet, horrible freedom.
We'll try to warn you in advance of when those are gonna happen, right?
But you'll each all have your own turn at both comfort and discomfort.
Yeah.
So take
Solace?
solace and or start to build your anxiety around those
Build
two.
your trepidation now. Question or comment over here?
Just comment, I think it'd be very valuable when wanting to innovate things, that's very fun, but sticking to what you're very, very comfortable with and the basics that you know, that's all a lot of like, I'm gonna do something wild, like. And I think we all wanna do something that looks really cool, but I really encourage people like, do some really simple shit and then feel comfortable and know what you're doing with
Sure.
that.
So
Can help,
I
for
think
sure.
that's part of what my advice is going to be for the next portion. of
Draft.
this.
You get
The next
another
one.
draft.
You get another
You
draft. You
got
got
another
15 minutes.
15 minutes. Which I would say take only 10 minutes for tying and then 5 minutes for untying.
So in your second draft, I want you to think about this in the context of I am going to use this harness for X. I'm going to use this harness for suspension. I'm going to use this harness to pull somebody around by. I'm going to use this harness to restrict someone's movement.
Have an intention.
I'm going to use this harness in the context of a goal, right? And then use those pieces of that context to inform the thing that you taught.
Like, I know I would want to pull them from their right side, so make sure that you have some structure on that right side that would allow for that.
Really recently, Melissa and I had an experimentation rope night where Melissa was like, cool, I want you to be on your back, but I don't want your arms to be pinned underneath you because I don't want to have to move you at some point.
And I don't wanna stem down the back of your spine.
I don't want to stem down the back, I don't want to stem down the front. I want to work on 2 stems on either side. Let's work on something together to do that thing.
Where you
right?
can be in a tengu.
So you're pitching in your mind, so, and you're gonna need to talk with the person you're tying, because you should always be talking with the person that you're tying about, here's the intent or the outcome I want to create, here are my ideas, what are your ideas, let's build the thing together, right? So you've got about 10 to 12 minutes, do that thing.
If you worry that being insistent will be detrimental to sort of like the tying relationship, if you feel like it's inauthentic to your personality, like any of those things, not being insistent that something changed, but being suggestive of another way to do it if you have that context is always really helpful. One of the benefits that I have of having two partners that are as well versed in rope as they are is that oftentimes they will just be, well, that sucks. Also, you suck. They will often say stuff like, okay, cool, this is not ideal. Have you considered this, this, and this?
Right. I can get through this for now, but for the next time, could we try X, Y, Z? Because that might work better for my body or for this construction or whatever, but that's because we have a lot of context. I mean, between Ordinals and myself, we're over 2 decades of experience being in rope. Like, that's a lot of fucking context. Y'all are just learning. Y'all are just figuring out both how rope works on your bodies, and how to communicate about that. So give yourself lots of grace here. And yeah, to Ordinal's point, insisting is okay at a certain point, especially when it's for your safety, right?
I think that you had an announcement that you wanted to make before you left.
All right,
Oh, yes, I'm, before the next class, the Saturday before, I was gonna host like a rope gym at I live with my grandma, but she has this like awesome backyard and a pool.